The reason why I write these books is to independent and free the organizations and the agencies put in their box and try and treat it like everybody else that's disabled. I need to make clear that I need to go away from that. And
When Chris had been told that he was part of the mission codenamed Orion's Quest, he could hardly believe it. This was not just another simulation that he had to go through. He was going into a real spacecraft, heading into space. Too shocked, he pondered on it for days before he could finally let out the news and tell everyone. Excitement rippled through the whole neighborhood. His friends, his family, and especially his followers on his blog were happy and exited on his behalf. He never ceased to take people by shock, and he had continued ahead. Despite his situation and the fact that he was disabled, he never looked back, not even once. And now he was going on a spacecraft. The mission itself was daring and ambitious, seeking to make research and conduct experiments on the effects of space travel on disabled people. And of course, Chris was the most important element in the mission. Cuddled beside his wife at night, he mused deeply over the course of his life and how things were steadily falling in place. "What are you thinking of?" Sarah said, turning to him and pulling the blanket over them properly. "How do you know I'm thinking of something?" Chris said. She laughed. "It's in the way you breathe. I know you more than you think." Chris smiled. "I'm just thinking, of life, thinking of you," he said, and turned to face her too. Sarah was beautiful in all ramifications. She wasn't just beautiful physically, she had a beautiful heart as well. She was one of the main reasons he was where he was today, and he never took that for granted. Her career had bloomed into something wonderful, where she did research work, contributing to aerospace engineering, and she was invited to speak in many programs. Sarah was an all-rounder, and sometimes Chris wondered how he was lucky enough to meet her. "What are you looking at?" she said. "Thank you for choosing me and being with me. I wouldn't have had it any other way," he said, placing a sincere kiss on her palm. Her eyes gleamed. "Thank you for not giving up either. This is weird to say as your wife, but you inspire me to be the best version of myself. I am super proud of you." Chris beamed. He was proud of her too. The next few days were hectic. Preparation for launch day was underway, and a lot of research was being poured into it. Chris and the other astronauts were engulfed in several simulations that copied every possible scenario they would have encountered in space. With each challenge, the bond between the astronauts increased, and it strengthened their collective spirit as they looked forward to the mission ahead. Soon, it was time for the final simulation before launching. A critical moment. They were dressed in their flight suits, and then they were led to the simulator, a replica of the Orion spacecraft. The simulation took them through the entire launch process, testing their skills and teamwork. Following the simulation, the crew was briefed thoroughly on the launch and everything to expect. Once the training team had decided that the crew was ready to take on the mission, they gave the go-ahead to the experts, and everything was set in place. In the days leading up to the launch, the atmosphere at the Space Center was electric. There were final checks and briefings to make sure everything was in place. Chris' excitement grew by the minute, and he couldn't wait to ascend far above the Earth in the spacecraft. He thought about the trials, the victories, and the unwavering support of his loved ones. He was so blessed and lucky to be surrounded by the people around him. He really was blessed. In the midst of all the excitement, Chris had gotten an invitation to be interviewed. The media coverage of the mission was massive, especially with Chris's story capturing the imagination of the public. He was known as a person who never let his limitations get the best of him. While he was interviewed, his story sparked a fire in the hearts of many that listened, and he showed them the importance of inclusivity and diversity in every space. On the eve of the launch, Sarah organized a special gathering, inviting family, friends, and colleagues from the aerospace community. Chris's home had never been as lively as it was that day. Plates of food were passed round. There were cakes and pastries on a table. The fragrance in the air was heavenly, and the decorations were simply beautiful. Laughter rang in the air as congratulations swept the whole of the place. Full of joy in his heart, Chris looked forward to the next morning. The sky seemed like a painting with streaks of orange-hued colors. Sarah got him ready and took him to the center. As soon as he arrived, he was suited up in preparation for the mission ahead. Seeing his own colleagues lined up beside him, all the days of grueling exercises were now worth it. As they were led to the base, the Orion spacecraft appeared in his line of sight. It was such a magnificent structure, white metal that stretched far above them like a giant touching the skies, a marvel of human intelligence and determination. The signal was given and all astronauts marched towards the spacecraft, climbing in one by one. As it reached his turn, he took a sharp breath. This was really it. His dream had turned to reality. Everything was not in vain after all. This was it. As tears burned at the back of his eyes, he thought of Sarah, his family, and the countless individuals who had supported him. He was not just carrying his dreams into space, he was carrying theirs too. He was paving the way for future generations with disabilities. Once they were inside the spacecraft, a voice came from the headset. Orion's quest, you are clear for launch. Chris took a deep breath. This was it. The journey to the stars was about to begin.